Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into something you literally use every single day, probably without even thinking about it. We're talking about the English language. Now, we've all heard people fiercely defend things like the King's English, right? They treat it as this pure, fixed, almost sacred standard of communication, like a pristine monument of perfect grammar. But here's the wild paradox we're going to unpack today. Despite this whole idea of a perfect standard, the actual reality of English, it's incredibly messy. It's chaotic, and it's just beautifully cobbled together. And to really shatter this illusion of a pure linguistic bloodline, get a load of this number. 40%. Out of all the monarchs of England and the UK, a full 40% couldn't even speak English natively. I mean, take King George I, for example. His English was so non-existent that he reportedly had to speak to his own Prime Minister, Robert Walpole, in elementary Latin. No way, right? So yeah, the very idea of this pristine King's English has kind of always been a bit of a historical mirage. Okay, let's dive right into this because there's a foundational conflict here that completely dictates how we view the words coming out of our mouths. On one side, we've got prescriptivism. Basically, this is the belief that language has strict rules, standards, and correct forms that tell us exactly how we should speak. It's absolutely the stuff your high school grammar teacher drilled into you. But on the flip side, we have descriptivism. And this is the observational approach that actual linguists use. They don't judge, they literally just watch how human beings use language out in the real world. As you'll see, the tension between these two camps is what makes studying English so fascinating. And spoiler alert, that tension doesn't just stay politely in the classroom, it spills over into society in some pretty intense ways. Section 1. The Politics of Language. Let's look at global anxieties. Now, it turns out anxieties about the English language pull in two totally opposite directions, and it completely depends on where you live. In the US and the UK, there's this political fear of decline. For example, in 2025, Donald Trump signed a mandate making English the official language of the United States to promote national unity. Over in the UK, politician Nigel Farage famously complained about feeling awkward on a London train because he couldn't hear English being spoken. But if we look at the other side, in non-Anglophone countries, the fear is the exact opposite. It's the fear of English dominance. You have German politician Jens Spahn getting intensely irritated at Berlin waiters who only spoke English, saying it hindered integration. Meanwhile, China has actively restricted English education, even banning overseas textbooks to curb foreign influence. So just neutrally looking at this, we can see language is constantly used as a proxy for national identity and cultural anxiety, no matter which side of the linguistic fence you're sitting on. Section 2. A Stereophonic Language and Its Blended History. The thing is, English didn't become the global lingua franca because it makes any logical sense. It absolutely doesn't. It got there because of its incredibly blended hybrid history, and this really brilliantly illustrates that whole concept. That's a sketch of the legendary Argentine author Jorge Luis Borges. Now, despite being an absolute master of Spanish, Borges actually preferred reading and writing in English. Why? Because he believed English is superior precisely because it acts as a stereophonic language. Basically, it's not just one language. It operates on two distinct simultaneous tracks. You've got the heavy Germanic roots and the sweeping Latinate roots. To see what Borges was getting at, just look at our everyday vocabulary choices. For almost any concept in English, you've got two words that mean roughly the exact same thing, but they carry a totally different vibe. Take ghost versus spirit. Borges noted that ghost brings this dark, heavy, earthy Saxon feel to a sentence, right? While spirit is a light, airy Latin word. Or think about brotherly, which feels super warm and personal, versus fraternal, which feels much more formal and institutional. Or kingly versus regal. This dual heritage gives English this incredible, unmatched nuance. You literally get to choose the flavor of your sentence. Now, what's really interesting, or maybe infuriating, is that this blended history leaves behind absolute chaos when it comes to spelling. Just look at this magnificent alphabet of silent letters. We have words like night, island, and tongue. Or, okay, think about the word kernel, C-O-L-O-N-E-L. It's pronounced like a corn kernel, which looks absolutely nothing like it sounds. This happens because English would often borrow a spelling from one language, like French, but keep the pronunciation from an older, entirely different form. So our spelling basically preserves the ghosts of history, even long after our modern tongues have moved on. Seriously, it's enough to make any language learner want to tear their hair out. Take plural rules. One animal is a goose, two are geese. So naturally, one moose should mean two meese, right? Nope. The plural of moose is just moose. Why? Well, geese follows this ancient Germanic vowel shifting rule from Old English, but moose, That was a loanword borrowed centuries later from an indigenous North American language, and English just kind of shrugged and kept the singular and plural forms identical. They look like they should follow the same rules, but they're secretly operating on completely different historical operating systems. Section 3, Invasions that shaped English. Let's look at the eras and influences. So to really understand how all these bizarre, cobbled-together rules and spellings actually ended up in our group chats and emails, we have to rewind the clock. Here's a quick mental map of the language's lifespan. We start with Old English around 450 AD with the Anglo-Saxons. Then Middle English kicks off roughly a century after the Norman conquest. Early Modern English pops up around the invention of the printing press. And finally, Late Modern English arrives with the Industrial Revolution. But the big takeaway here, it's how incredibly young English actually is. It's only been around for a mere 1.5 millennia. Guys, that is literally just 1% of total human language history. But, of course, people were living in Britain way before English was even a thought. Before the Anglo-Saxons arrived, Celtic speakers named the land. And as the languages shifted and layered over time, we ended up with some hilarious accidental tautologies. Take Pendle Hill in Lancashire. Pen is the old Celtic word for hill. When the Old English speakers arrived, they didn't know what pen meant, so they just added their own word, hill, creating Pen Hill. Then, centuries later, modern English speakers didn't realize Pen Hill already meant hill, so they tacked on a modern hill. We are literally walking around calling it hill.
So the crucial point here is that language is so often forged through conflict and dominance. Look at the definition of an exonym here. It's a name given to a group by outsiders. When the Anglo-Saxons invaded, they pushed the native Britons westward. The invaders then used their own Germanic word Welsh, which literally meant foreigner, to describe the native people. And that word eventually evolved into the modern name Wales. So think about that. The invading forces conquered a land and literally named the indigenous people foreigners in their own home. It's a pretty stunning example of how language fossilizes power dynamics.
And the invasions certainly didn't stop there. In 793 AD, the Vikings showed up. But unlike the Anglo-Saxons, who pretty much displaced the native Celtic tongues entirely, the Vikings actually assimilated. Old Norse and Old English were just close enough that they blended. And this was a huge game changer, because the Vikings effectively stripped English of its super complicated, clunky grammatical gender system. Even more wild, they donated our core third-person plural pronouns. They, their, and them, those are all Viking words. It is incredibly rare for a language to just swap out its core pronouns like that, but the Norse influence was just that massive. This whole historical mingling also gave us what linguists call doublets. Basically, that's when two similar ancestral words evolve side by side to describe distinct things. For example, the Old English word skjorte and the Old Norse word skirta both originally just meant a short tunic. But as these two populations blended together, the English word shirt became the upper garment, while the Norse word skirt became the lower garment. The exact same thing happened with ditch and dike. So English is literally a historical compromise between invading armies, mapped right onto the clothes we wear and the landscapes we live in. Section 4. Is English even real? Languaging as an act. Okay, having seen just how incredibly patched together this whole thing is, we kind of have to challenge the idea of pure English altogether. In fact, modern linguists are increasingly stepping away from treating language as a noun and instead viewing it as a verb, languaging. This is the idea that language isn't some fixed artifact you can just stick in a glass case in a museum. It's an active, continuous practice. I mean, think about it. There is no single English. There are over 2 billion active users dynamically shifting, breaking, and remaking the rules every single time they shoot off a text or grab coffee with a friend. That standard dictionary version we hold in such high esteem, it's really just a historical generalization. It's a snapshot of a constantly moving target. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to chew on. If a language is actually just something we do, an active, breathing collaboration of billions of people, rather than a static entity that we own and fiercely protect, what does the future hold for global English? Is it going to fracture into hundreds of new, distinct dialects? Will it just keep absorbing the vocabulary of the internet and global trade until it's completely unrecognizable to us today? The King's English might be a thing of the past, but the people's English? It is evolving faster than ever before. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.